Hello, everybody, and welcome to one of our In Conversation series. Today, I'm really excited to be joined by Jamie Willey of Bamboo. Bamboo is a business development business. But Jamie, hi, it's good to be with you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and about the business, please?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Paul. So nice to meet you all as well. So my name's Jamie. Been about sort of 20 years in the sales space. Started off in nothing to do with marketing at all, in a very old school Wolf of Wall Street style sales desk environment. I pivoted into our industry through the intermediary space back in the noughties, and before going sort of full agency size, sort of leading sales and marketing teams at businesses of all shapes and sizes. Met my business partner at DDB Omnicom, where after sort of a bumper year in COVID, as I'm sure we all had in the digital space, we came back together last year, just sort of really moaning about how, generally speaking, present company excluded, of course, we're all fairly bad at doing new business as an industry, and that historically, from an events networking perspective and a consultancy perspective, we've all been kind of held hostage by very limited choices. So yeah, we brought Bamboo to market to try and be a sort of fresh and third option, if you like, to both how we go about new business as agencies, and also how we go about networking and meeting people.
Cool. And so you're sort of you probably got a great overview, I'm sure you have, of the market at the moment. I mean, what's your take? Because I mean, one turns on the news and you see all these stories about tariffs and all the not rest of it and stuff going up and down. But what's your take on the sort of the agency market for new business at the moment?
Absolutely. So I definitely think it's changed more than just a fundamental level, especially since COVID. Um, you know, the decision-making process has evolved. On average, it now takes around 8 decision makers when considering sort of big commercial decisions such as new third parties and partners, and that's actually a 50% increase from
Mm.
4 years ago. So that suggests that we're just navigating more complex decision making processes than ever before, and I think it means we have to be much more multilingual than ever when addressing kind of the challenges of various stakeholders. It's no longer good enough just to be talking to the marketing stakeholder or the digital stakeholder or the technical stakeholder. And I think kind of what that's meant from the efforts in order to get in front of those stakeholders. Some recent stats from kind of the B2B sales space suggests that actually kind of only 52% of people follow up after first contact. So,
Really?
I hosted 20 female leaders at the Epsom Derby Ladies Day on Friday just gone. So only half may actually kind of follow up with those contacts that they've made from that day. And that drops off very steeply, that only 10% make 4 or more contacts with prospects. Conversely, 80% of sales occur between the 5th and 12th contact. So as businesses in multi-stakeholder environments, we need to be operating in the top 10% of sales performers to convert 80% of the business that exists out there. Of course, that's just anecdotal, not scientific, but I think it shows that we need to be working harder than ever in order to grow as businesses.
That's some really frightening statistics there, especially on the follow-up of stuff. I mean, that's quite extraordinary. Um, so if we look at it really from I guess from an agency point of view, which is our collective interest, what are you seeing from agencies, and how do you think those sort of statistics that you've just mentioned,
Mm.
overlaid with what's happening more generally in the economy, are impacting what agencies are doing?
Sure. So typically, at Bamboo, our sort of core agencies that we work with, they tend to follow the same similar profile. So they are usually founder-led agencies. They are usually kind of sub 10 to 15 million pound a year agencies. They've tried to outsource their lead gen. Equally, they've tried, that hasn't worked, so they've tried to kind of in-house teams, but because they're not sales leaders themselves, they've struggled to really manage that and nurture it and make it work. So what I'm finding at the moment is a lot of agency founders and at small to medium-sized agencies, of which, by the way, there's over 24,000 in the UK right now, are just sort of sat there just going, well, I've tried everything. I don't know what to do next. And the knee-jerk reaction is to then kind of look at your proposition, look at your brand. How can we be unique? How can we stand out? And actually, the truth is that you can't. We're working in an extremely crowded space, and I think it's no longer one of the things I've noticed that's changed since 2020 is that you can no longer just stand out by product or service. And a recent statistic shown that actually 39%, trust is cited as the most important deciding factor when purchasing services from a third party partner, with price actually only accounting for 13%. And I think there's been this kind of feeling that, oh, we need to be the cheapest, or we need to do something different, or let's look at AI. But kind of, I think essentially what we're doing is we're selling people, and that we I think that statistic kind of informs us that we must prioritize building relationships and credibility over merely trying to differentiate through price or product or service.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. And thinking about it also, I guess, in terms of the way that the agency client relationship has changed. I mean, you go back maybe 10, 15 years, of course, and there was a lot of AOR, agency of record type of contracts, and they would extend over a couple of years, wouldn't they? Now it's a much more project-based approach that a lot of clients take. So I guess that need for a relationship is increasingly important, because you have to re-engage, yes?
Yeah, absolutely. I think kind of when I first started talking, sort of mentioned how I've sort of fundamentally seen the sales process change. I don't think it's very linear anymore. It used to be, right, a client's got a problem, create a brief, put it out, chemistry, long list, short list, pitch, win or loss, right? Don't get me wrong, I think those processes still exist. They're just fewer and further between. And that actually what's really, really interesting over the last 12 months for me is there seems to be this shared opinion that brands are just in-housing everything at the moment. And actually, a recent statistic from Marketing Week suggests that actually 62% of brands have outsourced work to a third party in the last 12 months, up from 46% same time last year. So I don't think the data supports the current kind of sentiment, but that's against a backdrop of the fact that, and I think this isn't a secret in the industry, I think we all know this, that the only 18.5% of marketers expect an increase in their budgets in 2025. And I think that kind of indicates that things are being outsourced, budgets are there, but the path to them has just shifted. And to your point, I think where we're helping our agencies win isn't trying to search for those 6-7 figure briefs and and try and go out to market and win them. It's actually, how can we build the relationships for senior stakeholders who do have pockets of budget, but the way that they justify those budgets have changed. And so finding someone that they can trust to come in and maybe get a sort of 50-100 grand budget off them to do whether it's a proof of concept or try and A/B test something, and then how you go in and then land and expand that budget. We're finding that that's just a much better way to secure what is going to be for the foreseeable finite budget from our stakeholders.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, actually, Jamie. I mean, if we could maybe delve a little deeper into that. I mean, fundamentally, what we're quite interested with as Mission Hubs is obviously helping our partners find ways to be better at what they do and create that sort of like competitive edge. And it's interesting that you spoke earlier about this sort of 25,000 agencies that you can't differentiate yourself, just don't bother, but you can build those personal relationships. That's the point of real difference, essentially. But is there anything else that we can do to sort of help agencies solve these issues that you're seeing in the market? Are there any sort of, Jamie, top tips that you could leave us with?
Oh gosh, I'm not sure about that, but I think kind of certainly where we've sort of said about that kind of linear journey that's become a little bit more complex and nuanced. I think as clients do focus more on building kind of relationships with trusted suppliers, I think kind of the traditional method of generating leads, whether that's through, especially now with the, a lot of our agencies are coming to me every week going, should we look at this automation, or should we look at this piece of AI, or anything like that? And I think actually it lacks authenticity and personality. And I think kind of when we're looking to build these new different types of relationships, I think we need to be looking at kind of our personality as a business, our people, because that is the only thing that kind of makes us unique, and how we're kind of getting out in front of those individuals through non-sales environments, and through just kind of building that rapport over time. Really great example at the moment is one of my agencies has just won a piece of business with a multi-billion-dollar fleet management business. That's been because of 3 years of my work. I've known my stakeholder for 3 years. He's never spent a penny with me, sorry. And it just so happened I started this business up last year, and now he's going to be spending some money with one of my agencies. And I think that's an example really of that kind of long tail, long-term kind of relationship building piece. And I think that's so where we're looking at that pipeline, we shouldn't be measuring it by how many briefs we're getting in. We should be measuring it much further up the funnel of how many relationships are we getting in.
So we really are talking about longer term thinking, aren't we? And longer term investment basically in new business, rather than thinking of it perhaps, and I know it's hard because we all work to quarters, etc., etc. But thinking about it in terms of, 6, 12 months and onwards, and building that relationship out, and then reaping the rewards a little further down the line.
Absolutely. I think, but put it this way, if any of your agencies were considering building an in-house team tomorrow, you're looking at an investment with salaries and everything else that goes around bringing in FTEs it can be north of £500,000. It can be north of £750,000 to bring in a CGO, a business development director, a marketing person, etc. And I think where they've failed previously is because there's been far too much focus on the short-term horizons within the business, because usually a business owner or founders made that decision because their back's against the wall. They lost a couple of accounts. Quick, we need to get some specialists in, and someone with a silver bullet, and then sort of 6 months down the line, it hasn't resulted in anything, because it's failed to meet the kind of short-term businesses. So I think definitely, and this is since COVID, where I've definitely seen the kind of sales cycles creeping out. We're working in kind of 12 to 18 month sales cycles, typically speaking. There was a famous telco merger with a red coloured media brand about 4 or 5 years ago, where I was working at the agency that had the media brand, and I know that they're going to be coming up for tender this year, because it's been 4 years down the line, typically a 3+2 contract, and so you can sit on that for 4 years, and then do something about it. But I think kind of we need to be setting our expectations around those kind of short-term business needs and matching up to kind of the long-term, and we call it, sustainable growth, that long-term kind of sustainable growth, really.
Yeah, no, agreed. Jamie, this has been great. Conscious of the time as ever. If anyone watching this wants to continue the conversation, pick that up with you, what's the best way to get hold of you?
So very simply, you can reach out to my email. I'm sure you feel free to kind of share the information with me. We're with your group. I think there's a few different ways that agencies can engage with us, and we like to invest a lot of upfront time in just getting to know agencies, because we at the fundamental core of our business, we believe people by people, and we live and breathe that. So we'd love to come in, have a chat with any of your agencies that might be kind of considering how best to kind of grow over the next 12 to 18 months. As I say, whether that's through kind of how we can kind of support the people process platforms within the business, or whether or not it's just you guys want to get out in front of some real life clients. As I say, we hosted Epsom just gone. We've done Twickenham this year. We've got Goodwood Festival Speed coming up, of which we've got a few spots left. But
get the plug in.
But we're also kind of lining up a few H2 events as well, where hopefully we can just get some agencies in front of some real clients. So, but everyone's needs are different, and we'd love to just have a chat with anyone that's just kind of sat there scratching their head thinking about where the next big win's going to come from.
Cool, great. Thanks, Jamie. Really appreciate it. And if anyone out there wants to follow Jamie, we'll stick the details up on the end slide. Equally, if you want to go and spend some time looking at some lovely cars at Goodwood, you can contact Jamie as well. Jamie, thank you so much. Great as ever to talk to you. Really appreciate it.
Great stuff. Thank you, Paul.